Hey, Catholics out there. So, tomorrow starts Lent. And that's cool. Maybe you guys have some things you want to do. Maybe you have some things you want to give up. Maybe you have some things you don't want to do. Let's talk about that. This is for, I guess, all men, but mostly for you married guys out there. Here is my number one tip for Lent. And I've been doing Lent for a long time. And Lent is one of my favorite seasons because it is intense, it's full of suffering, and I like intense things, and I like suffering, and I like self inflicted suffering. I like to see how much I could quietly take. And that's all. I know it sounds crazy to you guys, but it's a jolly good time for me. It's a jolly good time to see all the things that you can do and give up and quietly go through the suffering without telling anybody. So, my big tip for Lent is don't tell anyone what you are doing for Lent. Like the stuff you're going to give up, like the things you're going to do, like the actual spiritual readings you're going to do, whatever you got going on, like don't tell anyone. Just execute. Just execute. Maybe there's one person you could tell. If you have like a confessor, maybe you have a private conversation with your confessor and tell him like, here's what I'm thinking about doing for Lent. Like he might know you best. But other than that, like I'm going to tell you guys, you don't need to tell your family. You don't need to tell your wife. You don't need to tell anybody. Suffer this Lent alone. Like know what you're going to be doing or what you're going to be adding or the different disciplines you're going to be doing, and then suffer them alone. And then don't complain about it. Don't even talk about it. So my wife would often ask me, what are you doing for Lent? And in the beginning, I'd be like, hey, I'm doing this for Lent. And some of it I had to say, like one Lent, I gave up like meat and cheese. And that sucked. Um, so meal planning performed by her needed to account for that. And giving up meat and cheese for the entirety of Lent, like, ended up putting like a bigger strain on her preparing meals because it was hard for her to always keep that in mind, preparing meals for that many days. Like that's Lent's a long time for somebody to do that, and it was an inconvenience because again, I had like kids, and like the kids need to maintain their normal calories, but like I couldn't. Anyway, it made like a big deal. So I learned this practice is not to tell her all the small little things that I'm doing. Like I give my wife ideas of like maybe what she could do, but for me, I don't say anything. Not a word. Nothing. So even after Lent, she would ask me like, "Hey, what'd you do for Lent?" You'll never know. You'll actually never know. And I'm not going to tell you anyways. And I think that's a good spiritual practice. I know it sounds crazy to some of you guys, but the other thing on the other flip side of this coin is I think just because of the way women are, like by nature, is they want to say, it's okay. Like, we're in a social event. Like you could just do it. Like, I'm not sure God actually cares. Like they'll say like little tiny things like this. And I don't think it's so much as they want to see you fail, but it's like they kind of like in their minds, they can make excuses for a lot of things. And I think for me, like the way I'm made is there's no excuses. Like I have a zero tolerance policy for a lot of stuff. And that's something I've come to know about myself. There has to be a zero tolerance policy for me. So if I'm not going to do something or I'm going to engage in a spiritual practice, I'm going to do it with zero tolerance and just truck through it silently without telling anybody, without complaining about it, just going through the suffering or the extra spiritual practices alone. And think about that. The metaphor of being alone, like Christ went out into the desert alone, alone, by himself. When he goes out to pray, he goes out to pray alone, by himself. You have these great examples of saints like Saint Benedict or Saint Francis, or uh, like look at Moses going up the mountain, all doing things alone. So take that message as well, to do things alone with no complaining, just suffer it quietly and do it. And at the end of Lent, it will be awesome. It'll be awesome. And a lot of times I come out of Lent too, and I have a new spiritual practice, or I've, overcome some temptation that I didn't think I could, because I had a zero tolerance policy. I didn't tell anybody, and I suffered it quietly by myself. So if this video is valuable to you, share it, subscribe, drop a comment, ask me a question, and that's it. Out.